it's set to be in the active state. And partially committed a transaction enters the state partially committed when the final statement in a transaction is being executed, right? So a transaction also go to fail state when the transaction management component discovers that the normal execution can no longer proceed, right? So if your transaction fails due to some hardware or software failure or a network failure, it can be restarted over a period of time. However, a transaction may also be aborted, right? So a transaction is aborted means the transaction is rolled back and the database is restored to its state prior to the start of the transaction. And finally committed. After successful completion of a transaction, we say that a transaction is successfully completed, right? So this states are represented by this diagram, right? So from active state, a transaction can enter into partially committed state and then to committed state, right? So that's the general flow, right? So a transaction is assigned the execute type. The transaction is said to be in a active state. When the transaction executes the last statement on the right. So whenever you are going to execute the last statement of the transaction, it's said to be in a partially committed state. And when the transaction finally completes successfully, we say that it's in a committed state, right? So however, a transaction may fail due to software failure, hardware failure, network failure, power failure, and so on. So if a transaction is suspended from its normal operation due to some failure, it's known as it enters the failed state, right? So from failed state, it is possible to recover the transaction, assign CPU time, right, and make it into a committed state, right? So however, if the transaction is if the database management system discovers that a transaction will not be able to proceed further due to non-availability of resources or some hardware or software failure, we need to abort the transaction and restore the database variables to its old values, and that's known as aborted state, right? So whenever you find out the transaction cannot control its normal execution of the instructions, you are going to abort the transaction and you are going to restore the values of the database variable to its old values, right? So these are the 5 states of your transaction, right? So hope you can follow it, right? So it will be once again show you the slide, so you can read it, right? So whenever the transaction is assigned the CPU time, it's in an active state, right? And the last statement is executed. We say that it's a partially committed state. On successful completion, we say that it's going to be a committed state, right? So these are the states of a transaction that you need to be familiar with. So I think I have given more description about it. It's like a transaction starts in the active state. So a transaction starts means it is assigned the CPU time. It is set in the active state. When it completes or when it finishes its final statement, it enters the partially committed state, right? So why do we call it as partially committed state? Is that at this point the transaction has completed its execution, but still it is possible that it may be aborted, since the actual output may be temporarily residing in the main memory, and any hardware failure may preclude its successful completion, right? So whenever the last statement of your transaction is executed, it is said to be in a partially committed state, because it is still possible that the transaction may be aborted due to some failure, and the output that is being residing in the main memory may not be may not be there to recover the system in the case of failure, right? So once you copy the updated values of a variable onto the memory as well as onto the disk, we say that the database is committed, right? So once the temporary results are available in the main memory, it doesn't mean that transaction is committed. So as we have seen in the previous classes, right? So committed means to meet the requirements of durability property, right? So something is, you book a ticket in a railway reservation website, IRCTC, you get a confirmation. Get a confirmation means that even if there's a failure at that point of time, the system should be able to recover, the database system should be able to recover the data in the system prior to the point of failure. So what they do is that they write the data both onto the server as well as onto the backup server, right? So before commit operation is done, the data is being copied on to the server, as database server as well as onto the backup server. If it is a personal computer, you are going to store the copy of the data onto the memory as well as onto the disk file. Then we say that it's committed, right? The transaction is committed and it completes its successful execution of the instructions. Right, right. So it looks like that's it. Right. So this is about the different states of your transaction.